Hi guys, happy Friday. Torsar here with another sports talk video, and right now I'm extremely annoyed because I have to reshoot this whole video because Streamlabs is crap and always changes the inputs for the microphone, and I check it almost always before every video, and of course, this is the one I didn't, and it was kind of a long one, and now I'm really annoyed, but hey, I'll try to make this one even better this time. I can't believe, I know Streamlabs is crap, but it's my fault for not noticing the obvious, little line moving up and down as I'm talking, or back and forth, whatever. It's just so frustrating. I don't understand why the input ever changes and why I have to go back in and reset it, but either way. Before I get on, I would just like to say, happy birthday to not only myself, but my favorite non-Yukon Husky basketball player of all time, Mr. Air himself, Michael Jordan. Happy birthday, Michael. Now, I'm going to talk about super teams today with the recent breaking up of the Nets and everything. I think this is an interesting topic that has probably these teams have existed for longer than you might think. Of course, we can go back to the Bill Russell times. People always say that those guys were playing against plumbers and everything, but man, those plumbers would have gone down to your rec league and taken your lunch money right from you while beating you at basketball. So let's just stop it with this. But I want to go over it because I was going to do research for this, but I think there's a Wikipedia page on it that's actually covers it pretty good. So let's start with the definition. A super team in the National Basketball Association is a team that is viewed as significantly more talented than the rest of the teams in the league. There is no official distinction, but it is generally viewed as a team that has at least 3 Hall of Fame, All-Star, or All-NBA caliber players that join forces to pursue an NBA championship. Most well-known examples, Big Three of the Heat, aka the Heatles, or the Hamptons 5 of the Golden State Warriors. Now, there might be teams that they've forgotten about. I would call those Lakers teams. I mean, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, and Kareem. I think those were super teams too. I know they just have the Celtics from that era on here, which they definitely were too. People might not think of Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale in that light, which is kind of funny how they have the Celtics on here and not the Lakers. But Robert Parrish, they called him the Chief for a reason. And Kevin McHale was one of the best power forwards in NBA history. I mean, he was really good. If they hadn't had Larry Bird, he easily could have been the best player on that team and a lot of other teams during that era. You could have won a lot of games with Kevin McHale and building a team around him. But I mean, the first example they give is the famous faux 76ers, especially once they picked up Moses Malone that year. You had Julius Erving, Malone, Maurice Cheeks, Bobby Jones, Andrew Toney, Charles Barkley. I mean, just a great team. Probably the one, I was thinking about these guys the other day and how I miss this era of the NBA. And I miss, I grew up, halfway between New York and Boston. And it was pretty much you were either a fan of New York teams or Boston teams for the most part. And I wasn't necessarily a fan of the Celtics, but they were on the TV all the time, or on TV all the time, the TV. So that's who you had to watch. I remember watching them on a little black and white thing, and they were playing the Bulls one postseason, and Michael Jordan had that game where he just went off for, 63 points, and it was just entrancing. And I said, I don't know who that guy is, but that's now my favorite player, and that's my favorite team. And I was a fan of that team all the way up until the travesty when they infamously broke up after the 98 season. Then you have probably the most hated big three of all time, or the super team of all time, in the Miami Heat. And I think this team doesn't get enough credit, man. People want to criticize LeBron James so much for this, but I mean, which one of you wouldn't want to take the power into your own hands, like at your job, if you could? What, we all want to be sheep at our jobs? Like LeBron James said, forget this. I know how big of a name I am, and I don't even blame him for the decision either. He was getting asked over 2 years before his free agency. Wow. So bad to think that people, would think it's a big deal by that point. And he knew his leverage. He knew his power. When Jordan was drafted to the Bulls, this is something that people don't take into account. Yes, the Bulls were a horrible team at the time, okay? But much of the NBA was still in the gutter. And also, the Bulls had something that the Cleveland Cavaliers didn't. And that's an owner who is willing to sit back and stay out of the way, and one of the better GMs of all time. Jerry Krause is extremely underrated and doesn't get enough credit because, you needed Michael Jordan. You needed the ego manager and Phil Jackson, who also, those are the two names I always think about when I think about super teams and not getting enough credit. Phil Jackson, LeBron James. But you needed him, Phil Jackson, to manage the egos. And then you needed the Jerry Krause to make the tough decisions, to say no to Michael Jordan, to all the players that he played with or knew from North Carolina and wanted on the team. No, Michael, we're not getting them. No, I don't care what you and Scotty think. We're getting Tony Kukoc. And honestly, I don't understand why those teams aren't on here either, at least the second three-peat teams. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, and Tony Kukoc, those are 4 Hall of Fame players. That should designate as a super team. But I think just because Michael Jordan was so good, he gets probably too much of the credit, however you want to think about it. But either way, this is where it all started, where it wasn't really the ownership or the management anymore, and where it was kind of like put together by the players. Again, I don't understand why people have such a problem with that, but either way, I think we'll get into it at the end because I think they sum it up with the controversy section on here. This is a really good Wikipedia page on this. Then you have probably maybe the next most hated one, depending on how you think about Kevin Durant's move. Kind of cheapening the NBA, making it pretty much just the Cavs versus the Warriors for a little while. KD, Steph, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. They were really good. And then you get to the failures, right? So let's get to the failures. This was a really good team, man. This Houston Rockets team, when Charles Barkley and Clyde Drexler, I know Drexler had already been there. Then they finally get Charles. But those Utah Jazz teams were just well run, well put together. They had been playing together for years. And, they just lost to a better team in the Utah Jazz. This happens. The same thing with these Los Angeles Lakers. This is the other one that I think about all the time when I think about the failures. When Gary Payton and Karl Malone joined up in the twilight of their careers. And, they had all the controversy at the time. Kobe was embroiled in his sexual assault case. He had the known beef with Shaq already. That was coming to a boiling point. Karl Malone got injured. I don't think he would have been enough to beat that Detroit Pistons team, who coincidentally became my favorite team after that blow up of the Bulls, because my favorite player of all time, Richard Hamilton, was playing for him, which I just found out. I never knew this to this day. I found out about it the other day. Michael Jordan only traded him because this was when he got drafted by the Wizards, and Michael Jordan was playing for and running the Wizards, right? Making all the pretty much like player GM, and traded him for Jerry Stackhouse to clear cap room when Kobe Bryant was threatening to leave the Lakers. And I never knew that. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But hey, that's the way the NBA goes sometimes, and the rest they say is history. This one was kind of unfortunate, but we should have seen it coming. This was Kobe's last gasp at a championship, the 012-013 Lakers. I mean, if he couldn't get along with Shaq, you think he's going to get along with a goofier, less skilled version of Shaq? I mean, Dwight Howard was a great player, but, we should have seen that coming. Steve Nash was kind of in the twilight of his career as well. Great player. That just didn't work out. And then the reason I made this video, probably the biggest super team failure of all time, considering how skilled these guys were. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden. I think the biggest mistake out of all of these was trading for James Harden. They had such a good young up and coming team, and they just traded it all away just for James Harden. They got Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. As far as what they had to give up, all they had to give up was money for him. They both joined as free agents. Why did you feel the need to get James Harden? And then, you just have the problems with everything that went on with Kyrie Irving, and then James Harden wanted to leave, and he was kind of looked at as like a quitter. Was he really a quitter now? I think he looks a lot better in that situation. I think he maybe was the one who first saw it coming. And then you hear, what was it, yesterday or maybe earlier today, that Kevin Durant said that he didn't even know about, like, this kind of all like hit him in the face this a couple days ago when Kyrie Irving wanted to be traded, or a couple a week or so ago, that it like hit him out of nowhere. Well, if you're such boys, how does that hit you out of nowhere? It kind of says to the level of just ineptitude, and I don't know, like how are they really boys? Who knows in the end, because they keep saying the right thing in public. Who knows how not wanting to get the jab affected the other teammates. But I've said it before, Kyrie Irving is probably the worst teammate in NBA history. He's such a great player, and it's just unfortunate because he's so entertaining, such a great player, but then he's such a bad teammate in a team-based game. And this is the thing behind all these. You have to be a good teammate. You have to fit in seamlessly. This team worked because Kevin Durant fit in seamlessly. And they didn't even have right from the start any trouble because Steph Curry didn't need to tell him, hey, I know I've been here and this is my team, but you need to take over. Kevin Durant would already do that. Unlike what Dwayne Wade, they needed a year to get going. And I'll say it again, that Mavs team they lost to is extremely underrated. Go look at the roster. You'll know every name on it. They're all very, good to very good players, and then you have the one superstar in Dirk. But that was a great team. I don't think there's a shame to losing to them. Obviously, no shame in losing to the Spurs. And then you have other factors. These guys aged out. Just sticking kind of with the modern history. Because this was all different before this. I know Danny Ainge put this team together, but these guys still had, more player power than even the 80s Celtics did. This was just when free agency was getting going, and guys pretty much still just stuck around with their original team for a while. And obviously you had the acerbicness of Rajon Rondo, Dwayne Wade's knees failing him, and then Chris Bosh unfortunately having health problems. Just KD just wanting to get out of Golden State just because of all the media chatter and online chatter around this being like a soft move. And it was. It was. But you know what? They were still a great team. They were fun to watch versus those Cavs teams. And and all the failures, some of the things you should have seen coming, some of the things you would have never seen coming. How does this team lose to that Detroit Pistons team? Again, they were a really good team, the Detroit Pistons. They played well together. Besides Rasheed Wallace, they had all been together for a few years, had been knocking on the door, and that was just their time, man. It's a team-based game. It doesn't matter how good Michael Jordan is. It doesn't matter how good LeBron James is. Unless you have just a ridiculous all-time talent in the middle of his prime, like a Shaquille O'Neal, you're going to lose if you're not a well put together team. Probably the same thing can be said about, even the Heat, man. It didn't matter how good LeBron James was. He could put that team on his back, but eventually a team like the Spurs that was just so well rounded and so well put together and had such a good coach, they were eventually going to get you, no matter even if you were the more talented team or perceived as that. So to wrap it up, this controversy section pretty much ends it perfectly. There have been some controversies about super teams in the NBA. Claims persist that superstar players are no longer looking to make the game competitive, but rather finding an easier way to attain an NBA championship ring and nullifying smaller contenders by joining other elites, aka Kevin Durant going to Golden State. From James' decision for the Miami Heat and Durant joining the Golden State Warriors, there's been derision from the media and fans in their efforts to unbalance the NBA. However, there have been cases for both sides, as others argue that the NBA has achieved its highest grossing TV revenue, that it was all done under the rules of the salary cap, and that it is enjoyable sports entertainment. Now, I will say it might be done under the salary cap, and I do agree with this last part more than I do with the first part. But how much collusion is going on? Maybe even, it's hard, you can't really say the players are colluding, but you know they're going back to the management as well, because they're the ones still making the decision. In the end, though, everyone claims to love the underdog, right, guys? But how far do we really want them to make it? And you see this in March Madness every year. We want those Cinderella teams, those underdog teams, to make it to the second weekend. But do we want them to make it to the third weekend, to the Final Four? I don't think so much, and the ratings prove it. I think some of those teams are perceived as not having much of a chance. Going forward in the NCAA, that'll probably change because there just are no more great teams because of the one and done rule and the transfer portal and just all that craziness. Guys going to schools just because they can pay them the most money now, whatever it is. It's a shame that that's happened. You don't get used to kind of, the players on your team anymore. You can't get familiar with them, but it is what it is. Sports is ever evolving, for better or for worse. And, like I said, this is probably the one that I look at as the biggest failure. My favorite super team was probably the Celtics Big Three and Rajon Rondo. I love the Heatles. It was great, man, just because there was so much attention around them. And I even love the Cavs versus Warriors, finals series that they had, 3 years in a row. I know KD, people always question that decision. Excuse me. But, those finals were entertaining, man. And in the end, they needed Kevin Durant to beat LeBron. They were never going to beat LeBron without KD, unless LeBron just didn't have two of his other best players like he did that one year with no Kyrie and no Kevin Love. So what do you guys think? What do you think? What was your favorite super team of all time? Is there a super team that you think isn't considered a super team that should be? Like I think the Bulls second run at the least should be, if not the whole run, should be considered a super team. Some of those Spurs teams of the 2000s and 2010s. I mean, look at all the Hall of Fame players. What was the one you think is the biggest failure? And are you on the side of you'd still rather see it be more team made or more, kind of player decided? I know that's been a recent thing. I believe Adam Silver just addressed it today, where he doesn't want to see the player trade requests. I don't think it's good for the league. Definitely it's better to keep it below board like KD did in going to the Suns. Kyrie Irving, I think, did it the wrong way by making it public. Are the Suns going to be a super team? I'm not going to get too much into that because I'll probably be making another video about that, or just the NBA, how it's wrapping up this year in general. And also, little teaser, mega draft of all NBA history. But anyway, guys, I'm going to go see a movie, Quantumania. Hope it's good. But either way, until the next one, stay healthy. Peace.